Hello, everybody. This is Caleb from King's
And,
Advisors,
and this is Dan.
and I am not sure if this populated on YouTube yet, Dan.
Well, I
So
guess we'll figure
let's
out.
yeah,
It looks
let
like it
me
is. It says
just
it's like streaming in the top with a little YouTube icon.
yeah, let me swap to my actual account. Just see if it's pulled up. Yeah, okay, yes. Okay, it's live. Cool.
Okay, well,
Okay.
excuse us for that terrible introduction now that we know how everything works. But this is the King's Advisors, and we're here today to give our maybe part one of who knows how many parts, but we're here to talk about House of the Dragon in depth. And
Mm-hmm.
couldn't be more excited to be joined by my co host, Caleb.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited for this. I've been waiting to do this for a little while now. And I, like Dan, could not be more excited to be here. So I guess we should just jump right in, Dan.
I know it's a little exciting. I don't even know where to start. Should we start with our just general?
So I say let's start with what is your overall opinion of House of the Dragon? If you had to give it a rating out of 10.
Yeah, I think that's fair to start off with. I think I can give it a solid 7.5. I think it's solid 8 maybe in some areas and 7 in other areas. There's some episodes that are 9s, but I definitely think that there's some episodes that needed improvement. But yeah, overall, it couldn't have come at a better time. I think it kind of revitalized a bit of people's spirits for Westeros and all the lore and everything there is behind it. And it's always nice when, no matter what the production is, it gets more people involved with like the books and the community and the theories. And that's, we'll get into that later. But I think that that's one of the most unique parts about the Song of Ice and Fire fandom is, it's been 10 years plus since we've had the last book. So all we've had to.
Let's get that. Let's get that.
Oh, I've got it right here.
In honor of Neurotic, let's get that.
It's 4,134 days since the Dance with Dragons, which I have on my desk next to me.
Excellent.
Since it premiered or since it released. And I think one of the fun parts has been the theories. But we can get into that later and what that means. But I think overall, I think it's a good show that couldn't have come at a better time. And I don't think we'll ever be so lucky as to see like a great show compared with such an abysmal show with the Rings of Power coinciding with the release. So.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. I think the timing, I mean, it was straight out of heaven. I mean, obviously Warner Brothers sat there and waited for Amazon to announce. I'll bet you House of the Dragon has been ready to go for a while now. And they were just waiting to find out when Rings of Power would air so that they could drop it during Rings of Power.
Yeah, I don't know if you heard this the other day. Oh, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you
off. I was just gonna say, I think overall, like you said, I think I'd be a little more generous. I'd say it was a pretty good 8 out of 10. There, like you said, there were definitely some low points in the show. There are some things that happened that didn't make sense or just weren't exactly what I had wanted to see. Unlike you, I have not read Fire and Blood, but between reviews from different people, conversations with you, reading the wikis and the World of Ice and Fire, I've kind of not gained. I've kind of figured out a lot of what actually happened, or at least a lot of what they say happened. And I think, there were definitely some parts that you're kind of like, well, is that really how we're doing this? But overall, I really love this show. I think it was by far one of the best examples of fantasy television since the 4th season of Game of Thrones.
I think that is fair to say completely. Just because, and I didn't mean to cut you off, just because of the for me, one of the best parts about fantasy is you feel the immersion of it. And so when you see people wearing clothes and living in places that look lived in, that's when you're like, this is nice. There's parts of it. Go ahead.
that's one of the things that, and I don't want to dwell too much on this since it's House of the Dragon, but that's one of the things that set Lord of the Rings apart, and that'll be a whole nother video. But the whole fact that when they built Hobbiton, they started building that from a year out of filming before they had even cast people. They had started building Hobbiton. And there's if you go and watch the appendices, there's a quote in there from Peter Jackson, which I think explains exactly why the Peter Jackson trilogy is so beloved. And it's because he says, during most fantasy movies and books, you've got the author or the writer has to give like a wink to the audience to where you actually, they say, just buy into this, just believe this is real, and that they couldn't do that with Lord of the Rings. And there's not a moment in that movie where you feel like they're looking at you and saying, just buy it, just come on, just get over the whole dragons and etc. and buy into this.
I know. It looks lived in.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I will never not love those movies. I fell asleep to the first one last night.
We often in this house watch those movies. We think they're just the perfect movies, the extended ones. We just pop them right on, and it's nice now. I don't even have to break them out of their DVDs because they're on HBO for now. And but I still have those DVDs if I need them, which is
nice. I've got I have like 2 different physical copies. I've got them on my iTunes. They're on HBO. I've got another edition coming in the mail hopefully next week. I'm very happy with my Lord of the Rings stuff. But yeah, so back to House of the Dragon. Excuse me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Back to House of the Dragon, because it is a show that deserves its own praise. And I'm going to jump back into what I was saying. I just really like, and this maybe we should just get into this now, and like I'll just say it like spoilers, everybody. So we're going to have spoilers.
Yes. 100% big spoilers.
This is just something that's going to happen, and for anybody who doesn't want to hear about spoilers, then just go watch the show.
Yes, please watch it.
There we go. So we're in spoilers territory. Everybody beware. So it starts off in the first episode with that tournament where it's just, in my eyes, well, I liked the first council. I thought it was nice.
The Grand Council of, what was it, 97?
101.
101.
Yep. And because we're really not that far away from the conquest. We're not that.
No, we are 100 years after the conquest. But even now, you still have to remember, even Dorne is not part of the is not officially part of the Seven Kingdoms yet. It hasn't been conquered yet.
No, it actually, they've killed a dragon. They kill at this point in the story. They've proved that the Targaryens are fragile. They're not invincible. They can't just use their dragons to do whatever they want. And that's kind of shows in the first season. You don't see this like omnipotent king ascend the throne in Viserys. You see this kind of politically struggling, he's got power, but he doesn't really know quite how to use it. King. I think it shows that if I make the wrong move, I can cost my family dearly, like with what happened in one of the first wars against Dorne, where they lost Meraxes.
Yeah, well, and that was what's her name's dragon, the one that
was Visenya.
Yeah, in Game of Thrones in season, I think it's 2. When they're in Harrenhal, when Tywin and Arya are in Harrenhal, and she's being his cupbearer, she talks about them and like reteaches Tywin the history of the conquest, and that's one of the things she talks about, the dragons and the fact that I think it's Rhaenys. It's been a little while since I've watched this season. But I think that the fact that Rhaenys carried Dark Sister. Or is that the other sister that carried Dark Sister?
The one that carried Dark Sister was not but I think it was Maegor's mother Maegor had Blackfire, I think. So the other line had
Yeah, sorry. Dark Sister was
They had
carried
two
by
swords.
Bithynia.
Yeah, and there's two lines,
Yeah.
really, theoretically, and then there aren't once
Mhm.
Magor is done. Um,
Right.
so yeah, no, I think that this is a really it's a good episode to kind of get us back into Westeros. Like it's like
Yeah.
it takes its time. It's like, hey, here are the characters. Like it's Game of Thrones. Strap in. Like if you don't
Yeah, you're
have,
gonna have a lot of names.
you're gonna have a lot of names, a lot of people with beards. You got to just try to keep up, which is one of the things I really like about it. And the thing that's like, people are like, oh, you can't make shows too complicated. And it's like, well, that's not true because we saw that with Game of Thrones. Like, eventually, normals catch up.
Yeah.
Eventually, people are like,
exactly.
it was tricky at first, but it's worth getting into.
I remember when I first got into it, and I got into it. So I watched the very first episode the day that the 4th episode of season 7 came out, and I was caught up for the 5th episode.
Oh yeah, I caught up. I didn't watch the show when it first came out because I was kind of like a little dismissive of it. I didn't read the books or anything either. And then I watched. I got enough. It got enough hype to where, true story, I found the first 2 seasons at a yard sale, and I was like, all right, I got to try it now. So I went home and I watched it, and it was just awesome. Went out and found season 3 because it was still, season 3 had just come out. Got crushed by the Red Wedding. Couldn't stop.
Oh my god!
The books. And then just never looked back until season. Well, I mean, I don't know if we're going to get too far into the weeds here, but it ruined my boy Stannis in season 5. I think that's what's going to happen to him in the books, and if it does,
no, Stannis is still alive.
Yeah, Stannis is still alive. I think he's going to have a tragic end for sure. I think that's what his character is set up for, but I think that he gets a lot of undue hate. But that's for maybe later in the theory crafting.
Oh yeah, video. Yeah.
Because,
so, Dan, let me ask you.
First episode, yeah.
So let me ask you. In the first episode coming into the show, did you watch the first episode the day it dropped?
No, I didn't.
So, like me, you waited. How long did you wait?
Just until like that Wednesday, I had some time.
Okay, yeah. So I wasn't going to watch.
It was coming out. I was like, oh, is it this weekend? And so.
Yeah, so I wasn't going to watch the show at all. Not at all.
No, me neither,
I was like, 8 ended terribly. Sapochnik is in charge of this. It's going to be terrible. Listen to what the actors and actresses are saying. This show is going to be the wokest thing we have ever seen. And at that point, I was sitting there thinking, I think it's going to be so woke. Rings of Power is going to look good. And Wednesday and Thursday, I got a text from a friend of mine that actually David went to law school with us, saying you need to watch House of the Dragon. And I was like, bro, that show looks terrible. And of course, I said that having not even looked at a trailer. Actually, I think I had looked at the first.
The trailers made it look worse.
And I'm sitting there saying, this is going to be some woke thing. And Sunday or Saturday, I was playing Xbox with a friend, and he said the same thing. He said I needed to watch it, and I said, you know what, fine, I'll watch it. And I watched it, and my first thought was, oh my god. Though I will say, during the tournament, when that knight gets Rhaenys' favor and says the queen that never was, my first thought was, oh, here it comes. This is going to be the whole women versus men. Women don't ever get anything. She was passed over. And you kind of get the feeling that that's what it's going to be like with the Great Council scene. And then it just falls away. It's like a veil just gets lifted almost.
Yeah.
With the exception of like maybe
itself in episode 9. Like it literally and
there's like 2 or 3 things
from the ground.
Yeah, there's like 2 or 3 things throughout the season that you're just kind of like feels a little woke. But I might be different from other people, but I'll take a little wokeness if I can get like 98% awesomeness. If you want to throw in little stupid, especially if that stupid content is kept till the end of the episode where the writers and actresses decide to give their opinion about what the episode means,
Oh
and they're
God! And
just wrong.
sidebar, they need to just stop doing that.
Yes, they do. Great use of the word sidebar, by the way.
Well, it's relevant and it fits, and great use of the word relevant.
Yeah.
No, but because now they've got the stupid, and again, sidebar from the episode itself, but they've got these stupid showrunners for Rings of Power going out there and trying to explain away their terrible decision making and trying to tell us after it comes out. Oh my God! You see, they have their own podcast now.
Yeah, someone needs to tell them to just keep their mouth shut. I can tell you right now, if they had not said a word, if they had put the show out there and not said a word, maybe a quarter of the flack they have gotten from the Tolkien fandom would not exist.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't think so. They ruined.
They've done a terrible job. Absolutely terrible job. But what I mean is, if they just had not, there would be so much stuff that we wouldn't be able to complain about because they weren't talking about it. They weren't being idiots.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's so hard to say, though, because, like, they're so, you almost, like, pity them. You're like, oh, come on, guys. You're really making asses of yourself with this. Like,
oh, yeah.
Keep taking bad takes. You keep doubling down. Like, you're not running a small country. Like, you're not in politics. Like, just, you didn't do a good job. You made all the wrong choices. I mean, even in their best scenes, it wasn't enough. Like, it was like, even in the best dwarven scenes, it's like, this isn't even close to good enough. Like, a dead Moria was more exciting than an alive Moria. And how is that even possible? You know what I mean? Like, there should have been all kinds of things happening more. There should have been guilds and companies trying to start new veins and markets. Like, there should have been a huge market there, and like people from everywhere come into Khazad-dûm because it's safe and secure and it's lively and there's always lights. Like, they should have had this whole personality of like an alive underground city in a mountain, and there just wasn't any of it. And you could tell by the first instance when Elrond was the friend of the dwarves. Like, there should have been one friend of the dwarves if there was going to be one. It needed to be Celebrimbor, and then that could have set up the whole, hey, we need to ally with Celebrimbor because he's friendly with the dwarves and we need the dwarves' help because they, blah, blah. I'm not even trying to write their show for them. I'm just saying, like, the material is there. Like, Celebrimbor is the friend of the dwarves. Like, his name is on the freaking door to Moria.
Yeah, exactly.
He's the one who made it. Like, it's not like that door was ever there before his friendship started with Durin the Third. So it's just frustrating. Like, you're just like, oh my goodness gracious. So I don't know. Maybe we should just get back to House of the Dragons.
Yes. Let's get back to something good. Yes.
Yeah. So what I've done is I kind of thought that, like, if we want to go like episode by episode and then also like character by character, maybe not super in depthly, but I feel like this whole show builds on characters, and I think that's the proper way
it does a very good job of just kind of introducing a character and then making easily and quickly explaining to you either whether or not they're, I won't say good character. Well, okay, so they're all good characters. They're all very well written. They're all very well acted, and even with the acting change that happens, I remember thinking we needed that we could accept a dip in acting if the story maintained, but I can't even remember their names. D'Arcy and is it Olivia Cook that plays the older?
Yeah, I think that's right. And
so Emma D'Arcy and Olivia Cook did a fabulous job, and I just want to say I was wrong. But let's go into episode 1. Okay, so like we were saying earlier, you got the Great Council, and they pick Viserys to be king over Rhaenys, who has the better claim.
Now, I think it's interesting now, like, let's just get into this at the first instance. Like, I'm not trying to sound nasty, but it's like, everyone's like, oh, she was passed over. It's like, well, the only reason she was even considered is because 2 other males were dead. Like, let's not act like she had the absolute most best claim anybody's ever heard of. and that like Jaehaerys' sons were dead. So that's why it was a succession crisis, because they didn't know who to go after the sons were dead. So they had to go to extended family. So it's like, and in the books there were so many other claimants, and yeah, she had a good claim, but it was like it's like a political bid. Like, it's just, you have to have the right backers, and she just didn't. And so I think that the way they took her character initially, and like, I'll just get into Rhaenys. I have her listed on my list here, and like, as the first, kind of maybe the first big thing that happens is this instance. And Lord knows we're going to talk about Viserys like a ton, so we'll just Rhaenys out of the way. I really was enjoying her stoic, like, you know what? Maybe there was a good reason I was passed over. Like, I actually don't want it. I have all the luxuries in the world. I have a family. I have like the second biggest, the second biggest house. It was like a stoic, like, you know what? That's like a really cool trait that somebody can have. Like, like, I'm okay with the decisions I've made, and I'm okay with moving on with it. And then that's when it's kind of like, it kind of just threw me out later in the season when it happened, but we'll get there. So
yes, we will.
Stoic for Rhaenys. That's why I thought her character was very compelling at first. But then I guess just to dive right into Viserys here too. I mean, like, obviously he was a good choice in a certain sense, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of the thing that, we were talking earlier about him having whether or not his claim was good and all that. And I remember, one of the issues with him is, he doesn't get it by birthright. He doesn't. It's not to use a term in our world. It's not divine. It's not a divine right for him.
No,
there's no divine right of kings. The lords of the land. Yeah, the lords of the land picked him. And so he's got to spend the entirety of his kingship knowing that he didn't get this because of exactly who he was. It very well could have been because he's a man and she's a woman. Maybe it was. Maybe that's why the lords of the land picked him. But we know for a fact in other houses that there are women that are in charge of those houses. I mean, you can, as far as I'm aware, there isn't anything in Fire and Blood or the World of Ice and Fire that says this. So you can look at.
There are undertones. Like, I think the best example we have of that, just to speak on it, if I could, the best example we have of that is the lady, the what's her name? It was in the second Dunk and Egg novel, where Dunk and Egg are working for a small lord in the Reach. And his family used to be more powerful, and the family that has taken over their keep is basically running everybody else off the land. She's in charge of that house. So, it's not some unheard of thing that these ladies can have their wills be done in these houses.
And the lady that's in charge of the house in that the Brothers Without Banners constantly visit. In the show, in Game of Thrones, the show, you've got Lady Mormont. Her mother is like rides with Rob. So you've got these examples of women that come and lead their houses, and sure, they may eventually pass them on to either their male heir or they get married. That happens with Ramsay and one of the women of the North. She has like this kind of great house.
Oh, Barbary, not Barbary. She's Lady Hornwood. And Ramsay makes her eat her own fingers in the tower because she's dying.
Yes, yeah.
Because she won't take her hand, and then they just claim the hand. They just claim the land. I said claim the hand. Because he was trying to marry her through force to extend his father's lands, because Hornhill is on the border of the Bolton lands. So the Hornhill is the Moose sigil next, and then the Bolton obviously being the flayed men. So
if y'all can't tell, Dan knows a lot about this stuff.
It's just it's nothing. So I think that with Viserys, would you say that the crown was placed on his head rather than he placed the crown on his head?
Yes, he 100%. Yeah,
So his reign was always going to be marred.
Real quick, we've got a chat.
Yeah, I see it in the chat.
We'll deal with chats in just a little bit, Matt. I would, yes, but
Yeah, I would definitely say there's a difference. Yeah, I would agree with Matt.
But there's still kind of a similarity between the two, especially depending on the house. If you've just got a little holdfast somewhere, it's probably not nearly as big a deal as if
running a kingdom. Yeah, I would agree. I would definitely
or as if one of the wardens was a female. But we'll get into that in just a little bit. But yeah, so we're sitting here talking about the first episode, and let's fast forward a little bit from the first thing I want to say is one of my favorite scenes in that first one is the first scene you see with the dragons, where Rhaenyra's dragon,
Cyrax,
thank you. Cyrax just looked amazing. The first time you watch, you can kind of see that it's kind of like, okay, it's clearly a green screen. And it's almost as if there's like fading around the edge of your TV. Not sure if that was just my TV. But it's something that I kind of noticed. A lot of people on Reddit were talking about.
Funny. That's funny you say that, because like I as critical as I find myself, I was just stunned with the dragon. I was like, oh
yes,
dragon.
Yeah. Well, it looked much better than I thought Drogon looked.
Yeah. They've had their time, and I think that's a good thing, because that's what George R. R. Martin said, was like he wants more colorful dragons, which I'm still peeved we didn't. I think we will in season 2. I think we're going to get a really cool Sunfire, but we can get into that when we get to like episode 9 about why Sunfire is so specifically important to the Green faction. But yeah, I would say this is like Rhaenyra's entrance. So do you have any comments about how she's first perceived? Because I would say that she has like this air of superiority around her. And I don't even mean that in like a critical sense. Like, I mean, like even the emperors had like superiority about them. So I was like, oh, well, these people are to be taken seriously.
Oh yeah, no, you definitely get that. I thought it was very interesting the way the relationship that you quickly saw between her and the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, who, I assume he's the Lord Commander. He's the Lord Commander at the end of the show. I assume he's still the Lord Commander at the beginning of the show. There's not a lot that talks about that.
Yeah, we don't really need like a first episode to be like, here's all the positions of power.
Exactly.
And here's the new position. Like we just need to pick it up as we go. Whether he is or isn't, he becomes it. Harold Westerling, and they couldn't have gotten a better actor, I think.
For so little lines, he commands the screen when he's on it.
Yeah. And he was so good in The Witcher. I don't know if you've watched The Witcher.
I have not, no. Yeah, and now that Henry Cavill won't be on it, I don't think I need to.
I know. I'm done. I'm tapped.
Yep.
Spent.
That'll be another video.
Yeah, that'll be another thing.
But no, yeah, I loved her entrance. I loved Westerling's entrance. I thought I really should have rewatched the show before I started doing this part. Because I can't remember what happens after that. I think.
Yeah, I mean, like that's the part where he calls for a tournament to be held because
that's right.
That's the big thing. Remember?
Right. Yes. Thank you.
The first episode is called The Heirs of the Dragon. So it's all about who these people are, what their relation is, what the older generation's relationship is to Aegon, and how they're preserving his legacy. And it's also about how these new players are being introduced to eventually accept the role. And we see it in this first episode when Viserys shows Rhaenyra the dagger, but that's at the end.
Yes.
So it works with this. The title works on a lot of levels there, because we're seeing how, because the show is so chronological in the sense of like, look, we're seeing these generations pass. Like we're seeing when Viserys and Daemon are young, hot-headed men, and they're getting elected, and they have fights and feuds, and then we watch them become old, and their children take up the fight, and then we watch the children become old, and then their children. So eventually, Viserys's grandchildren are still like fiery, even in this, as a result of what we've seen happen in this first episode. But I cannot go any farther without talking about the beautiful tournament. I mean, that was just that was the first time I was like, okay, we're not just in rooms talking in heavy cloaks. Like, here we go.
Well, and that's one of the things that I thought was so incredible. For what? Let's see, we've been since all the way back in like 1954, I think it was, when Robert Taylor's King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, which if you look at our banner is up near the top right corner of it. You've got jousting scenes, and they're always just fine. They never show exactly how jousting was. Because one of the great things about jousting was it was very quick. You started at each end of the line, and it was a very quick dash. You go down, you hit the guy in the middle. If you don't win right then, you are very quickly grabbing your next lance. You're not. It wasn't this like calm.
It's not baseball between the pitches.
Yeah. It wasn't calm. There wasn't. What's the word? It wasn't chivalrous. It was very quick and very dangerous. And I loved that we finally got to see that. We saw a little bit of it in that movie that came out a couple months ago, The Last Duel, where you got to actually see some of the bloodiness of it. But I thought they did this amazingly. And it still does its job of showing like the height of the Targaryen Empire with how grand that jousting scene is. And then you compare it to the jousting scene in the first season of Game of Thrones. And it's just like, Robert, why are you sitting here in like the dirt? Look at this tournament that Viserys puts
first
on.
Season. We didn't have the budget. Like, that was Game
of Thrones exactly. Season, that's exactly what it is.
But that's
you had $20 million for this.
Like, yeah, that's something we all looked at and was like, okay, cool. You got your first season done. You know, yeah, it sucked not to get the Whispering Wood at the end, but whatever. If good storytelling is how you're going to get across, like, you know, like these battles happened, like I think that's fine. And then eventually it did move into just the battles, and that was such an eyesore. It was like, oh, take me back to just seeing Robb Stark riding on his horse, being like, we won. You know,
well, and that's one of the things you see in the books. In the books, with the exception of, I think, the battle on the Blackwater, there aren't battle scenes. It's always done
in the first movie, in the first season is from the book. He doesn't get knocked out. He actually experiences a whole battle. He kills a knight. It's actually really crazy.
Right, but if I recall correctly, it doesn't. His POV chapter ends with something like, and he rode to war, and then it goes to another chapter. And then, like a couple chapters later, it's just a retelling of the battle. It's not, and he dodged left and swung right, and he managed to kill Sir whatever his name is.
That's exactly what it was like, because I remember he had a horn on his helmet. I've got my Game of Thrones book here. He's got a horn on his helmet. Yeah, here it is. He goes to war. He's got the war horn. There's a horn side away, fill the air. Yeah, a crescent of enemy spearmen had formed ahead. You know, Shagga went busting through the gap before the shields could close. There's a whole action scene.
Birdman rode past. It's been a while since I read it.
Yeah. No, it's a badass scene. They definitely robbed Tyrion of it. Let me see. It's for anybody who's got the Batman Books published edition. It starts on page. Oh goodness, I just lost it. Yeah, there we go. Okay, yeah, because even Tywin is impressed because he was.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's see. It starts on page 675. Very good.
Okay.
Very good.
I'll have to go back and look at that.
Yeah, very good chapter. But they did, because that was the battle that Robb Stark sent all of his men away to kind of be a distraction, so he could pin Jaime in.
Yeah. So that he go to Oxcross.
Yeah. Well, he went to the Whispering Woods.
Yes.
Where they pounced on
Oxcross is the next battle that he wins.
Yes, that's the next one he wins. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I
talk about the young wolf.
Yes, the great. So sad. No, I thought. So I know Shad has an issue with Daemon's armor. But considering that Westeros is a magical world, I think Damon's armor is incredible.
Well, I just defer to Shad on stuff like this. Like,
Yeah,
I like spectacle. I like fantasy stuff. Like, call me crazy, but I think the Eyrie is a cool castle. I like, I think
it
that's
does.
fantasy.
So
It has its
Damon's armor,
problems.
you can see that it does look kind of plasticky, almost 3D printed like, but still better than the horse armor in Rings of Power.
Oh God, that was terrible. You know what I would have liked to see is if he had like dress armor that looked like that. You know, like if he was like he has like really like fancy armor, and then he
Yeah,
like has like squires or something come up and remove it before he goes into battle. He's a
yeah, that
practical
would have been
person.
cool.
Like he understands the need for display of like, look at how powerful I am with my badass armor. But then he
Hmm.
also is like, hey, take this off. I got to fight. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That would have been cool to
Um,
see.
but yeah, so I thought it was really interesting pairing that with the birthing scene, where you've got you can definitely see that Otto Hightower and Viserys not Viserys. What's that Corlys Valerian? That's the V.
Corliss, yeah.
Yeah, you've got Corlys and Otto Hightower both there. You can see that they're both kind of on edge. What's going to happen with her, and then
Yeah.
you've got the final duel between it's Kristen Cole and Damon.
And Damon, yeah.
And Kristen Cole gets Rhaenyra's favor.
Yeah, he wins. He beats Damon.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's how he hits on the Kingsguard because,
Yep.
Not only is he handsome in the books and he's noble and true in the books, this is before he becomes I'm a Green supporter, but this is before he becomes the piece of shit that he becomes. So, I can admit that there's monsters. It's just a fun exercise to like see how people react to different atrocities. I think really is the best part of this whole show and story. But I don't know. I think it's good. This is a good part because it's hard because this is the part of the show is where real life meets fantasy with George R. R. Martin's books because it's like the next part. There's another tournament. So like in the show, there would have been another tournament like 2 episodes later. And I mean, for God's sakes, they got to be
exactly.
Film,
yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
But now I would imagine in the next season we could potentially see a couple of more tournaments, like because it's a thing. It's like a traveling thing. It's a business. You move around from place to place, tournament to tournament, selling stuff, putting on shows. You know what I mean? Like it's more of an industry necessarily than than just this thing that pops up that everyone knows how to put tents up and start. You know what I mean? It's more complicated than that. And
you read a lot about that in the Dunk and Egg book.
Yeah, that's just in this universe. I'm sure in real life it was a little different. There probably might have been companies or, that would have been kind of cool to figure out how tournaments got set up, like arranged. But that probably stuff doesn't get written down.
So I absolutely loved. I can't remember her name, the actress that played Aemma. I think she did an amazing job, and the fear you could see in her eyes when the Maester takes the series aside and is like, I don't know if she's gonna live. There might be a chance to save the boy. Not really sure. And you kind of understand, especially anyone that knows anything about childbirth, whether it's actually having a child or just watching some old episode of The House or something. But you can definitely kind of see what they're talking about, C-section. And you're like, oh God, today? I mean, back then, can you imagine what that would have been like? There's no way she's surviving. And
cesarean section is an ancient technique. I mean, I'm not even here trying to just like stand on its legs, but like, at a certain point, childbirth has always been traditionally one of the most dangerous things in the world to do. I mean, people died, newborns died. It wasn't even until this last 20th century that we really understood how to kind of prevent some of these premature births. And a lot of these, not so well children. I mean, a medieval sense of children is to show them no care in nature because it would open yourself up to pain when they died. Because, it's like out of 10 children, 2 would live. So you don't even name them at a certain point. and I think I scared off our last viewer. But that's okay. I'm just saying, like it's a different society, and I think that's maybe one of the things I find different with A Song of Ice and Fire, like Westeros versus like our medieval world is, our feudal society, our medieval world was born out of necessity. It was born out of blood and war. Like the
Yeah,
Huns were sweeping across the plains of Europe, and there really wasn't a centralized government in Rome anymore to defend them. So these pocket societies that kind of rose
exactly.
up in the sea of chaos. And so that's why there's such centralized power within these families, because that's who protected people. That's who kind of stuck their neck out to go and fight against the hordes of the people from the plains. And anyway, maybe I'm getting off track here, but I mean that like it doesn't make sense in our world because it was a necessity. Like looking
Exactly. Yeah.
back, it's like, well, yeah, don't judge yourself, because it was like,
Well, and we're so far removed from that.
That's what I mean. Yeah, we don't understand their state of mind.
Yeah, there's not a person alive, with at least in the United States, probably, that's ever lived in that kind of society where you had to form this, serf-like society in order to survive. But that's honestly neither here nor there.
Yeah, well, it kind of is, because it goes. Show is about.
True. Yes. Exactly.
It's about the struggle, the different struggles between men and women. I think we'll see that a little bit more in the second season with some more battles. I think that's when our characters are really going to have to put the tests. Like, Kristen leads the armies, and Jace gets involved in leading armies, and Damon's there. Like, this is when they're called off to do their duty.
Yeah,
and they're not the ones giving birth and potentially dying and carrying these children. But they're, that's kind of, I like the mirroring of this show and showing that, look, we're all stuck in this together. Like,
yes.
Well, you see that one of us has it better.
Yeah, you see that later in the third episode, which we'll get to in just a bit. But I tell you, I loved how the show ended, how this season ended, this episode ended, where you've got Aemma's funeral, and we're reminded that the Targaryens do not bury their dead; they burn them. And you have to remember, Aemma isn't a Targaryen. She's only a Targaryen by birth, but she still acquitted that honor of a Targaryen pyre, because she's married to.
I wonder how an Aaron funeral is.
It's probably a little bit of, they probably open up the moon door and just push you out.
You think? I was just wondering that. I was like, would that be an honor?
Yeah, if you go to the bottom of the veil, there's a bunch of flowers and little white crosses out there.
Yeah. Little blue falcons and moons out there.
Yeah, exactly.
I bet you they have cool like mountain like Minas Tirith mountain tombs.
Yeah, well, so one of the funny things about this episode is I'm watching it and I see her die, and I'm kind of like, oh dang. And I don't know if I picked my phone up to look at something. I don't know if I walked into the kitchen, but I come back, couldn't have been more than a minute or two. And we're back, and we're at the funeral. Emily Alcock, by the way, just looked, her entire demeanor during that scene was incredible. You could feel her pain, and that's what was so great. That's one of the things that's so great about the show. You can feel the pain and the effect that every scene has on every character of this show. Every scene is earned, with the exception of one, which we'll talk about later. And I just remember sitting there hearing about the heir for the day, thinking, what do you mean he's dead? Balon died? When? Like, I had no idea. And I think it's because I walked out of the room for like 20 seconds.
Jeez, yeah. That was a rough 20 seconds to walk out on.
Yeah, but I'll tell you. So we've been on this episode for a little while now. I just want to give some last thoughts. The scene at the end where Otto tells him what what's his name says. So a couple of things with that. First, something that doesn't become obvious until later is that Damon's concubine. She definitely plays a much bigger part than I think anyone thought she would. And I think it becomes clear later on. She's definitely one of the people that told Otto what he said.
Yeah, I think they're saving her, like, what her ultimate goal is. And here's the thing. I think what they're setting up
she's
is, like,
dead.
yeah. I think they're trying to set up that she was not, like, there was going to be other powers at be, and I just don't think they knew what to do.
Yeah, I think they realized they started making too many stories.
Yeah, because then you get into the whole, like, this is the issue with the books where we're at now. You get into the whole, like, what are Illyrio's plans? Like, who is he? Like, and then you get, like, this whole slew of, like, well, now are there actors from the free cities making moves here, like, on behalf of people over there? Like, oh my God, like, you're just trying to get the Westeros stuff down, and then all of a sudden you enter in, like, the whole East Essos, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is a lot.
Let's be happy we haven't got anything from the South.
I mean, we're getting there.
But yeah, so I when I watched it, when I saw Damon's feet toast and everything, or the amount of the toast that you see, I definitely did not take it as a haha, now I'm the heir. I didn't see that at all. I thought Matt Smith did an amazing job in this episode of kind of playing both sides, because during that toast you can feel a little bit like he's really sad, and then when Otto comes in and tells Viserys what he said, you get this feeling like, oh, he's the snake in this show. He's the one doing everything for himself. Which is weird considering where he goes later in the show, but he didn't want Daemon as the heir, which was a big part. We kind of missed that, but that's the big part of this episode. Who's the heir? And I think the show does a very good job of making Rhaenyra the heir, at least in this first episode. What do you think, Dan?
Well, I think it's tough because, and I think maybe now we can, even if we wanted to get a little deeper with what we do, I think that the league, now we're getting into Westerosi law. And this is where I feel like Martin isn't a lawyer. He's not, like, he doesn't understand, like, the way that, like, nations are kind of founded on property law, like how the line of succession affects the future. Like how that's just the way our world works. Like, we need predictability, and, like, obviously in our world, women can inherit property absolutely fine. We don't have nobility or title succession here in this country, but other nations do, and they have different laws. So, that's where it gets kind of nitty gritty, because the Westerosi law, right, dictates that it passes over the female line. And it would be right now in the story, the question is Daemon the heir, or is Rhaenyra the heir? It doesn't, like, this is the king's will over the law, right? It's like a Magna Carta, right?
Exactly.
Like, I feel like the whatchamacallit, the Council of 101 was like the Magna Carta moment. Like, this is like when the lords are taking, like, we have a say in this, right? And if our say is important, then we choose this, and then they chose it, and that was enforced. So that was kind of like the precedent that the Lord's choice in this matter is important, not just the king's will.
Exactly.
So that's where the division comes. That's where the whole fandom is split, because it's like, well, the king is the law, and I'm, maybe call me a classical liberal, but I don't believe in absolute monarchy. So I don't think a king sets the law. I think a king sets the pace and the boundaries, and then, whatever happens in the world is something that happens that checks that power. In this case, it would be a rebellion by the Hightowers and the Lannisters saying, no, we're not doing this,
right.
And, at a certain point, I think everybody's entitled to throw down their loyalty and say, I'm just not doing this. I think that's part of being, if you're going to live in a society that claims to be free. It's like, you have a right to say I'm fed up with this.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
So that's where I think it's difficult, because it's like, is she the heir? Well, according to whose law? Whatever law is going to be enforced by whichever power wins. So if the Greens win, then it'll always pass to the male, because that's the law that they are following. Whereas if the Blacks win, well, then it's the king's will, which could get infinitely more messy, because you never know how predictable it's going to be, which, as we know down the line, is exactly what happens, because Aegon IV, Aegon the Unworthy, legitimizes all of his bastards because he has the
Blackfire.
So.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
So I've got these terrible coughs.
Yeah, it's all right. Hey, listen, the Blackfires were the true steel. You know what I mean? It was the other families that were.
I really hope we get to see that on television in the future.
See, it's gotta have to be after. Like, here's the thing. I think there's all this talk about a Robert's Rebellion spinoff show, and I'm like, I don't want to see that, because as a book reader, what exactly happened at Harrenhal at that tournament at Robert's Rebellion is the crux of the show. Like, that's got to be like the last chapter of A Dream of Spring, is like what actually happened there. You know what I mean? Because then it would give us so much more context for everything else that happened.
100%. Yep.
Yeah, I don't think he knows.
Yeah, which is why we still don't have wins winner. But yeah, so you've got
the way there.
Yeah, so you've got this scene at the end that I honestly believe is the reason this show has been made, so that to connect it with Song of Ice and Fire. You got the scene that shows you got that beautiful dagger from Game of Thrones.
Oh, stop showing the dagger.
Yeah, and so you've got this dagger, and they put it in the fire, and you see this beautiful steel, this beautiful Valerian steel, which is Damascus, by the way. And it's almost kind of like the ring, after you put it in the fire for a little while, this inlaid print comes out.
Nice. It's like, okay.
And it
go ahead and grab it. It's quite cool.
Yeah, it's Aegon the Conqueror's dream about the White Walkers, or the others, we'll call them in this, because we just kind of forget about the last 2 to 3 seasons of Game of Thrones. So you've got.
Is my boy Stannis dirty?
I'll take 5. I'll even take 6, because I did enjoy the Battle of the Bastards, but I will drop it at 7.
I will convince some members of our audience that Hard Home is the worst episode in the show.
I'll tell you right now, if Jay is watching, you'll never convince him of that.
Hard Home is the worst episode. It's the downfall of the show. It's objectively.
I know. True. I've heard it. I've heard it before.
It's objectively true, but a different episode.
Yeah. So
hot take.
I thought you were going to continue. No. So you get this link between A House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones, and I'll be honest. At first, I thought it was poorly done. Like, I thought, why would you've started very well, and then you've reminded us of Game of Thrones. And I thought that was a very bad idea. But apparently no one else did, because it grew in viewership to, I think the numbers for that episode, including the TV viewers and the streaming viewers, was like 14 million people.
Jeez, that's a lot.
Which is a lot.
Well,
they grew their audience between the first and second episode.
I'll say they jumped right out. They have the same song, and they got that little dagger.
Yeah,
And I'll say this:
I love the song.
Well, the song is great. I listened to it in the off season. He did nothing wrong. Raymond did nothing wrong at the whole show. He did a great score every season. I think it's a shame, because like what they did was undermined their own storytelling. Like that was a good sequence of events, a really beautiful cinematography when Cersei blew up the Sept. It just soured in everyone's mouth because it had no ramification. It didn't mean anything. Yeah. In retrospect, so it was like, well, this is kind of stupid then, right? Like, and I think that was like the issue, but the score was amazing in that scene.
Oh yeah, loved it. So Dan, real quick, before we move on to the second episode, what was your overall rating of the first episode?
I would say it was a solid 7.5. Unfortunately, the tying in with the as a book reader, that reveal that Aegon had a dream, it's I know a lot of the fandom is okay with it because it does check out. I think that it doesn't check out canonically. I think it checks out like if it was revealed later in the books that that's what he did. I think it would make sense only in the sense that it would explain why the Targaryens feel so compelled to do it, even though I thought it was a fine justification that they were just conquerors because, the Night's Watch, if that was their goal, was to stop the Long Night, well, they didn't do a very good job of it. That's my point. So unless something changes in the books, then I can't really see that it's like, I just have to accept it with my arms crossed, right?
Yeah. So
like,
a little point of order there.
But the tournament and the acting and the casting and the sound, everything was very, very, very good. It was just maybe I gave it a little too much. Stop. If you're doing so good at giving me what I want, stop reminding me that you didn't give me what I want. And the season.
No, I agree.
Later seasons.
I put it at 7.5 as well. I thought it's probably one of the best first episodes of a TV show I think I've ever seen. It's very good. It does a great job of holding you. It does a great job of kind of showing you where we're going to go in this season. And it does a really good job of telling you like the important stuff that we're going to be seeing. But one thing I wanted to say about tying them together, I think there's a reason that George put that in this show. I think he wants to see how we'll react to it before he puts it in Winds of Winter. But I will say, I think there is already a little bit of a importance on the Long Night with the Targaryens, because if you remember in the third book, when Arya and them are at, I think it's High Heart.
Yeah, with the ghosts.
With the dwarf ghost lady.
Yeah, the dwarf of Hart Hill.
She mentions, or someone in the Brotherhood mentions that she gave a prophecy to the Mad King's father about, or his grandfather actually, about Azor Ahai coming from his line. And I think
that's all based on Aegon the Fifth. That's all based on Aegon the Fifth and Dunk. That's where things get messy because Aegon the Fifth names his first son Duncan after Duncan the Tall.
Right.
But Duncan falls in love with Jenny of Oldstones instead of an heir, or instead of a real like a good line, right? And so I think it's still a mystery what happens with Duncan and Jenny for the most part. They might die in Summerhall, but his other two children get married to each other. So
yeah. So okay. So we both gave this a 7.5. The first episode. The second episode, the Rogue Prince. I think this is one of the kind of weaker episodes because there just isn't a whole lot that moves the story. There's a lot of content given to event that eventually pays off, but I think because we don't really see the payoff until later, this is just this is just a weaker episode. It's kind of a storytelling episode. So there's a time break between this and the first episode. 6 months happens, and Rhaenyra has been named the heir. At the end of the first episode, we see all the lords come to King's Landing and bend the knee and swear to agree to the to the new line of succession. And I forget how long in. There's a there's a small council meeting in this, and let me just double check that is the episode. I'm thinking, yes. So there's a small council meeting in this episode where, at least for the viewer, you get to see Rhaenyra act as the heir for the first time, and for me, it felt a little rushed. Like you see this this show of force of hers when they're discussing the issues in the stone steps and with the crab feeder, and she just kind of stands up and says, "Oh no, we should send our navy. Let's go fight them." And there isn't a feeling like she's earned the ability to basically defy the king, because Viserys, her father, has said, "We're not going to touch that," and she just kind of countermands him, which is kind of a.
Well, this is the part that's weird too, because
so
she should be better at this than she is, right? Like, she should be savvy, and she should understand what the king meant when he did that. Like,
especially because it's been 6 months, so she should be better than what we see.
Yeah,
but
especially because she could ask questions in private, be like, "Father, why did you do that?" And those really sweet scenes, like, well, because
and I think that's something we're missing. We're missing growth for her.
Yes, we're
missing. But I will say, we kind of
his other children like it. Sorry, we're talking over each other. My bad.
I will say we kind of get that growth later in the episode. But so she's dismissed from the council. She what's his name? Viserys says something like, "Thanks for your input, but goodbye." And the Lord Commander takes her to pick the next member of the Kingsguard.
Right. Well, why would she be the one to do that?
Well, so I totally get why she's the one. This person's going to have to protect her. She's going to have to trust him. So I didn't have that big of an issue with her being the one to pick him. I thought it was weird that there was no, and my father will confirm or something like that.
Yeah, like Otto should have been there. Like,
He should
have been like, "No, Your Highness, like, you're not picking this lowborn. Like, we need somebody we can trust, the family."
So I do think there was a little bit there gained with the Lord Commander being there, but I don't think he said enough. I think there should have been more conversation. She should have asked his advice. Who do you think is the better knight? Something like that.
Also, how do you get an audition for that? Like, how do you just like, "Hey, I'm going to just show up to the courtyard one day in my armor and be picked"?
Yeah.
Based on looks and nothing else. Like, like, maybe and that's the thing, there should have been another tournament, because this is where Kristen Cole actually enters the story. Like, he's the one who, he beats Daemon and he kills, this is not when he kills Joffrey. That's a different tournament. But
yes, it is.
That should have been just where he entered.
Yeah, no, I think I think this was a little rushed. I think they knew where they wanted to end this episode, and I don't think they had enough time to do everything they wanted to. So I imagine some of those scenes are the ones that ended up on the cutting room floor. But no, I thought it was very interesting how she decides who to pick based on battle experience. I thought that was a very wise decision.
A little bit of history would have been good there, because Kristen Cole's family they're not warriors. So his father was a steward for a family.
Well, and that's one of the
Stormlands.
And that's one of the changes in this show. Kristen Cole.
Yeah, what battle are you talking about?
So in the book, if I recall correctly, Crimson Cole is actually from Dorne, not from the Stormlands.
No, they made that up for the show. He's actually from the Stormlands. His family is a house of stewards. And
okay. So I got
it
vice versa. So in the
yes.
book, he's from the Stormlands. In the show, he's from Dorne.
Yes, they made some changes there, which really wouldn't be, he really wouldn't be a whatchamacallit. He really wouldn't be a trusted at all. Like, why would you let a Dornish man? Like, he's not even a
exactly.
thing.
Yeah. But that's hold down the fort, Dan. I'll be right back.
Yeah. I saw. Yeah, no problem. So after she chooses him, like that's kind of where things get icky. How convenient for Caleb to step away when I talk about Otto sending his daughter in to comfort the king. But so this is a great time. Actually, I'll jump in with some nerd knowledge here. This is a great time to discuss that it was rumored that Sir Otto, who was the hand of the king before the last king, so he was the hand of the king for Jaehaerys, the predecessor of Viserys the First. And for Jaehaerys, it was rumored in the book by not like that. The book Fire and Blood is split between green sources and black sources in the sense of who supported who at what time. It's very complicated. It's very confusing. Go read the books. They're very good. You're not going to go read the side books first. If you're interested in Fire and Blood, go read Fire and Blood. Don't read The Song of Ice and Fire yet, just because it's not finished. So it's tough once you finish it. So it was rumored by Mushroom, I believe, that he would send his daughter in and Alicent to comfort. I'm doing the finger thing with the finger quotes here. Comfort the old King Jaehaerys before he died. So it was rumored that he was trying to, send his daughter to go sleep with the old king, which is disgusting, but it also, came from the other side. So it's understandable that they would want to say that. So I was giving some context because the next scene is when he sends Alicent in to comfort Viserys. So
okay. So we've got that. We've got it. It becomes, I think, pretty clear pretty quickly that Otto has ambition, and it definitely feels very skeevy considering it's his daughter. Not that sending in some servant girl wouldn't be skeevy, but I think it's just it feels.
Does it feel like
it feels dirty? Move? So I was thinking that because we've got what do we have? 3 hands in Game of Thrones. We've got Eddard.
Theoretically, there's Jon Arryn.
Yeah, but we don't really see Jon.
We don't really see Jon, but we follow his act, like what he did his hand in the first book. But so there's Jon, then there's Ed, there's Neddard, or Ned, or Eddard, excuse me. There's
Tyrion,
and then technically Tywin after Ned, who then gives it to Tyrion while Tywin's at war. Tyrion holds the fort down, then Tywin comes back, dies, and then the new hand of the king is Kevin. So who dies. So we don't even know who the hand of the king is.
In a very great way, and the way he dies in the book is much cooler than dying in the Sept. But I you can't help but compare Otto to the other hands that we've seen, especially in I think it's the 5th episode where he's dismissed. You can't help but kind of think, I don't think Tywin would have been dismissed like that. I don't think he would have done what he did. I think Tywin would have had someone else whisper it. So I think it's one of those things that, like I said, you can't help but compare them. And then you can't help but think, I'm not, is Otto good at this? Because I think he's good when he knows every single thing that could happen.
Well,
but I just don't think there's any luck on his side.
Do you think he thinks he's doing the right thing for the realm? That's the argument, right? Like that's
Yeah.
where it gets messy. And this is like there's no clear sources, and it's all up for speculation, which is a frustrating thing at the same time. But it makes it an interesting talk. It makes it an interesting discussion about like
Yeah.
power and the way people see it, and what makes a good leader. And that's what makes Song of
'Cause
Ice and Fire so good is that it is deceiving. You're always supposed to be thinking about it, really,
because
and
power is a ladder.
because power is alluring, eh? But yeah, it's just an interesting thing. So if you approach it from the perspective of keeping the realm at peace, then I think Otto's iron grip is viewed as a way of like, well, look, I'm just enforcing the law, and that's the thing. Maybe as lawyers, I get really frustrated because in the books, the master of laws is a really important position. There's like a master of ships, masters of coin, hand of the king, master of laws. There's all these really important roles. A small council is important. They're not just like a group of men in a room or a group of people in a room that just make decisions. I mean, that is what they do, but it's got more bearing to it. And so, I guess it's just one of those areas where you're not really sure of how they're able to carry out their will, like with private forces in a city, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like that's technically all the king's property, right? The city would be the
Right.
king's property, and then everybody else would be kind of on his property by license that could theoretically be revoked, and that's why you'd have guest right. You wouldn't have to do anything like murderous, right? You wouldn't do that theoretically. But it's just difficult. So it's like, how does Otto view himself acting in this way that like he is the second most powerful man in the kingdom? He wants like peace is ideal. It's good for profits, right? Peace is good.
Yeah.
And so with that in mind, because it's hard. And I listened to a podcast the other day where it was about ancient history, and it was about this medievalist who came on to explain what's so appealing and what some of the issues are about Game of Thrones. And I'll link it in the description. It was just a really interesting point where he said that the difference between our world and Westerosi is that the nobody believes the religion in Westeros, whereas people in the medieval world believed their religion. Like they had belief. Like it wasn't something they didn't operate on realpolitik at all times. Like there was a genuine fear of the soul being damned for eternity. So it was like, it doesn't, people like that people aren't operating like that in Westeros. They're always playing to win.
Exactly.
Stupid idiots play by the rules. You know what I mean? And it's like, that's why it's kind of difficult because that's why it's difficult to imagine because you have all these people who were supposedly scheming at all times of all day,
Yeah, no, I agree.
So you're like, well, anybody could be doing anything, So it's hard to judge Otto in that sense because he is just kind of in the show this like sneaky bad guy. Right? I have a difficult name to pronounce, and I'm sneaky with a beard. Reese Iffens. Thank you, Mahler, for teaching me how to pronounce that.
I spent the entire time thinking it was pronounced the same way that Ray Fiennes pronounced his name.
Ray Fiennes, yeah, maybe it's almost like that. Is he Welsh too?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's time we talk about Lord Corlys Velaryon, the Sea Snake.
Yeah, so
the most interesting man in the world.
Yeah, so prior to the show coming out, we kind of didn't really talk about this at all. But prior to the show coming out, they announced that the Valerians had been race swapped from being very, I believe they're described as very pale and looking much like Targaryens, I think minus the eyes. Am I correct on that?
For who? I'm sorry, buddy.
Aren't the Valerians described as looking just like Targaryens, just minus the eye stuff?
In a similar sense that they're just like a vassal house of the Targaryens from Valyria, so they were never dragon
so you've
riders.
got there was a lot of there were a lot of people saying that this show another reason this show is going to be bad because they've race swapped the Valerians. And
I'm just over it now. At first I was like, it kind of takes away from like the vagueness, like it makes her seem blatantly stupid.
Yes.
But
Yes.
whatever. I
and
guess.
we'll talk about what he means by that in a little bit.
Yeah, maybe she should have slept with somebody who looked like her husband.
Yeah. But that was one of the things that a lot of people were talking about. What's funny though is after the first time we get to see Corlys Valerian, I'd love to remember the name of the actor, but I can't. That complaint just went away because he's an amazing actor and he does an amazing job playing him. So the big thing with Corlys in this episode is that he is the master of ships and he is the Lord of Driftmark. Driftmark is an island that's southwest of Dragonstone. So it's closer to the King's Landing than Dragonstone.
Why don't you take him to the map?
Let's do that.
Finally, because this is where it starts to get interesting with power and where the positions are and stuff like that.
I want to make sure I do this right. Share.
I also put another link in the chat for like an artist's rendition of what Corlys Valerian looked like.
Yeah. So here is Blackwater Bay, where the famous Battle of the Blackwater took place in season 2.
Yeah.
So you've got King's Landing right down here in the mouth of the bay, or sorry, not the mouth, the end of the bay. And you've got Dragonstone right here, which is where another scene from this episode takes place. And it's where the seat of House Targaryen is, and it's where Aegon and his sisters landed when they flew to conquer Westeros.
Yeah,
but this is Driftmark down here. That's as far as I can go. So this is Driftmark down here. And one of the great things later on in the show that we get is we get to see Driftmark, and it looks amazing. So you got Driftmark down here, and this is where the Valerians landed, and this is where their seat is. So yeah, that's where we are. So you've got Corlys Valerian from here down at King's Landing, and he is suggesting to Viserys that Viserys marry his daughter, Lyanna. Is that his name?
Yeah.
Yeah, is that his daughter's name, Lyanna?
I think so. Sorry, I'm trying to look up a picture of the Driftwood Throne. Show everybody what the thing should be.
Sorry, it is. It's Lyanna. So he's suggesting that he's using the whole argument of we are two Valerian houses, we're the most powerful. Let's continue this great relationship we've had over the years. But you kind of get the idea that this is all because of what happened to his wife, who is Rhaenys Targaryen, if that wasn't obvious. So, there's a very, let's call it cringe scene where he's walking in some garden at King's Landing talking to Lyanna. And I think at this point, Lyanna is like 9. And Viserys is, I don't know, 45. So it's very like, ugh. But and they make a point of that. He says, Viserys says something like, your daughter is 9. And he 12. Says, 12? Yeah, okay. 12. So says, your daughter is 12. And
hey, I put a link in the chat for what Driftmark kind of looks like. It's supposed to look like.
Corlys
builds the new castle there.
Yeah, so Corlys says something like, well, you want to have to lay with her for another couple of years. And so you just kind of get this whole, it really is about politics with everyone, isn't it? And
yeah, I had a good word for that. That happened to me the other day at a networking meeting. And I didn't ever heard this word before I started going to these meetings where people view you just in the way of like how you can help their business.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And it was frustrating because the phrase kind of struck me back, but it's called a transactional relationship. And it's very hollow and it's very fake and it's very depressing when you look back at it because it's not real and they're just being fake with you so they can basically either get you to get people to spend money with them or for you yourself to spend money with them. And you're just kind of like, ugh, you just get the skeeves from people like that where they look at you and like you realize everything nice they said, like everything kind or everything thoughtful you thought that they were doing or saying. You're like, oh, you just wanted money.
Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's very political.
So, yeah.
So we get and later, I think it's leaving that scene. Well, actually, yeah, it's the end of that scene. We get this little conversation between Rhaenyra and Rhaenys, and it's one of the examples of some like cringe wokeness type stuff in this show. And there's not a lot of it, and I think they do. If there's a point by the showrunners to throw some wokeness in and then throw some counter wokeness behind it to kind of even it out, I think they do a fairly good job of that in this show. But you get this conversation where Rainey says something like, you're only here to make babies and continue the line. You have no real power. And Rhaenyra is just like, I just want to marry who I want to marry. And then it cuts, I believe it then cuts to a conversation with Viserys in the small council, I believe, where we find out that Daemon has claimed Dragonstone and taken was
basically
it
the horde of
Syrax's
dragon
egg?
eggs, right? Yeah,
I think it was just one egg. I think he took an egg of Syrax.
But isn't that where dragons are born? Like, could they not be? Are they born in King's Landing also? I think that's what this part of the lore isn't really explained like 100%.
So I think it depends on where the dragon is living.
If it is, I'd be more than happy to read it.
I think the dragons at King's Landing lay their eggs in King's Landing, and the dragon guards care for the eggs there. And then in Dragonstone, the dragons on Dragonstone lay their eggs in the wild, which is why you get that scene later on where Daemon finds dragon eggs.
I guess it's difficult for him to get there. It's not exactly like
so he took an egg of Syrax's, I believe, which is why it was such an issue, because Syrax is Rhaenyra's dragon, and so all of Syrax's eggs belong to Rhaenyra, and they're supposed to go to her kids. So you got this whole issue where Daemon takes the egg, declares himself Lord Dragonstone, and his concubine starts with a V, I believe.
I think it's still Zarya, isn't it the White Worm?
Yeah, I can't remember her name though. There's a lot, like we said earlier. There's a lot of names.
Well, I mean, are you talking about the actor's name?
No, the character name. What's the name of his
Visaria.
Visaria.
Mizaria with
Mizaria. Okay, thank you. I literally just found the name too. So he sends a letter to King's Landing saying, I have declared myself Lord Dragonstone. I have taken Syrax's egg, and I intend to marry my mistress, Mizaria, as my second spouse. In the same way, because he's married. He's currently married to
Ray Royce.
So he's currently married to Rhea Royce, who is the head of House Royce, which is a secondary family in the Eyrie.
Runestone is their seat.
Yeah, Runestone, right here. And on that, now that I've remembered I'm doing that, I will
sworn to the House of Aaron.
Yeah. And so
if anybody cares, the Royces are the first family we see in Game of Thrones televised history. It's the house of the guy who gets killed in the prologue of the first season.
Yes.
Weimar, dance with me then, Royce.
Mm-hmm. And so you have this whole issue that happens on Dragonstone. Otto goes out there with some knights. Interestingly enough, if I recall correctly, he goes out there with Kingsguard and Targaryen soldiers. Yet later in the show, you always see him with Hightower soldiers. So I think there's a little.
Remember, he was acting on behalf of the king then.
Yeah. And so he goes out there, and then Rhaenyra shows up on Syrax. They have a conversation, and she takes the egg back, and everything goes all well. The differences from the book, I don't think there's enough of a difference in that for us to really discuss.
Yeah, we don't really know too much about that event.
Yeah.
It's just kind of established. It's the episode's name, The Rogue Prince, shows that him and Rhaenyra are, destined to be. And yeah, I think that's where that really.
Yeah,
That was fine. I think it was
yeah.
good. I think it was a little cheesy. It was like she showed up and was like, "Oh, I'm here to stop." And I guess you kind of see this like maybe she could be more diplomatic with Otto. Like he does have a right. Like his father is mad. It's not just like cute that it's like, oh, that's Uncle Damon. It's like, well,
yeah.
He's kind of challenging my legitimacy as being like a more Targaryen-like Targaryen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you see it like that? Like
I see it as sort of I see it as a brother testing his brother and being like, I want this and you have it, and I see it as like family squabbles that Otto shouldn't have been there. There shouldn't have been some official thing. So that's kind of how I see it, and I think we get a very good example of what I mean in the next episode. So we'll wrap this one up real quick.
Yeah, that's a good spot to wrap it up.
So, I just want to say,
I got one more episode in me. Yeah,
you've got that little bit between Corlys and Daemon at the end of this episode, where Corlys is saying, "Let's go to war. Let's defeat the Crab King and claim our birthrights as the second sons of the realm." And I love this moment because for 2 episodes we've kind of got this feeling like Daemon hates his brother. Like he's sick of him being weak. He tells him in that conversation in the throne room in the first episode that he's weak and that everyone sees it and he would protect him. And then you get this moment where Corlys basically says the same thing. And he goes, "I will talk about my brother in my own way. You will not." And it's this very like primal defensive thing between brothers. And I, being a brother, I totally get that. There are a bunch of times where I've said things about my brother and I've been like really annoyed with him, or I'm like, "Why do you like this?" Stupid stuff like that. And someone else says it in front of me. And I'm like, no. That's my brother. I will say what I want about my brother. Don't you dare say what you want about my brother.
It's also the second too, so it's like, hey, don't second thing.
So there's a lot of like truth in some of these scenes. And I think that's one of the things that resonates with people. So yeah, overall, I think this is the weakest episode so far. This is of these 2. This is probably a 7, maybe a 6.8 for me. I think there's a lot left to be desired. But like I said at the beginning, this is an episode they use to set up stuff, to explain stuff, to give us exposition for the next episode.
Yeah,
and the episode after that.
Taking liberties. Yeah, I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, we don't know anything about these times. Like, this is all right. Mm-hmm. I didn't really see that they were setting things up too poorly. There's areas now that I see they've set up where I can see that it could run into issues later. Mm-hmm. But for these ones, I'm like, oh yeah, this is good. Yeah, the actresses were good. The Rhaenyra actress and the Allison actresses were very good. It felt like they had some chemistry. This is kind of before things break down between them. So it's nice.
Yeah. So now we have a time jump,
right?
Yeah. Now we have a big time jump of 3 years.
Second of his name, and this is a big episode.
So we're 3 years forward, and Viserys and Alicent have had a kid, and we've not only have they have a kid, but we find out that the Valerians and Daemon have been fighting the Stepstones for 3 years now.
Yeah, why don't you go to the Stepstones?
And yep, I'm going down there. So this is the Stepstones, right down here between Tyrosh and Lees. So
do you want to maybe mention like what the triarchy is and the disputed
yeah,
lands?
so that's something I forgot to mention earlier. So they mentioned the triarchy, and what they don't mention is exactly what the triarchy is. And Dan will correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding the triarchy is a what's the word?
It's a coalition of
Yes, thank you.
three cities of
It's a coalition
Tyrus,
of three
Mir, and
cities.
Lys,
Right, these
who are
three. This
traditionally at
triangle
war.
right here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
these
exactly.
houses,
Yeah. So they've
cities
been
unite and they go to
yeah.
war.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's called the disputed lands, because sometimes Tyrosh will fight Mir and Mir will fight Lys, or one of them will come to the aid of the other, and it's just a big mess. And this is where a lot of the mercenaries hang out, like because there's always wars going on over here. And they're at this time, like Caleb mentioned earlier in our stream, Dorne is not part of the Seven Kingdoms. So if you see, it would actually benefit everybody if to be allied with Dorne. I mean, Sunspear looks like a good port; it can get through everything well, and it's theorized that they're the ones actually funding the crab feeder and kind of stirring stuff up in the triarchy so they can what would eventually maybe be a land invasion to start. But that's, again, not really Dorne's style. They're more like bunker down. So,
yeah. So we've got this episode, and it starts over here in King's Landing. And what we find out is this is going to be a hunting episode where they go to celebrate Aegon II's second birthday. A lot of seconds here. And so they go to Kingswood for a hunt, the same place where Robert Baratheon goes for a hunt and dies. Well, he doesn't die there, but he gets gored by the boar. So a lot of this episode just takes place in tents, but it's a really, for what should be a very boring episode, it's a really good episode.
Yeah, I really love seeing a hunting party done proper.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that transpire. There isn't a lot of important stuff that happens in this.
I'm not really crazy about the action scenes where it's like, I hate the jump cuts and you don't know who the animal is on the other side of the bush, and you're just like, okay, I'm go back to the tents and the sitting around and the cool gear that everybody has for being on the go.
So one of the big things, one of the big things we see in this is we see Viserys starting to deteriorate. We see he wears gloves all the time because he's missing 2 fingers. And it's on the same hand where the end of the first episode, he cuts his pinky on the Iron Throne. So we start to see a deterioration of the king. And we get to the hunting party in the Kingswood. And you meet a bunch of different characters. You meet Sir Strong. Well, I say meet. Some of these characters are grown. You understand more about the character. So Strong had been in the small council before, but I think he was the laws guy.
He was the master of laws.
Yeah, so you get this moment where he comes up to the king to wish Aegon a happy birthday and then give him some advice. And Viserys says, "Let me guess, you think my daughter should marry your son, the greatest knight in the land?" And he says, "No, absolutely not. She should marry Valerian's son. Unite your 2 houses again, fix the rift, and everything will be copacetic." So you can already see someone who's not out for himself. And that becomes a very important part. But even earlier, we get to see the new Lannister, Jason Lannister. And he is every bit of a Lannister as you could expect, though looking a little more dirty than
a little
most Lannisters would.
He's almost too on the nose, like prickish. I just think that like they could have done a little bit better to be like, hey, these are hundreds of years before the people we know. Like the Starks we
Yeah.
see are. It's not going to be Ned coming down to the King's Landing.
Unfortunately.
So and I think other people forget that it was Ned's honor that was legendary, not like so much the Starks. They're seen as pretty brutal in times. So
Yeah.
but yeah, so like the Lannisters are historically like clever and witty and wise, and you know what I mean. Like it's Tywin that's like the most ruthless in their history.
Exactly.
So, like, I can see him being more like, like more flamboyant. I can't see him being like so like just so blatantly.
Exactly. Yeah. When he goes to give the spear to Viserys as a gift, and he says, "I hope you use this spear when killing the boar or whatever." I don't think he says boar. He all for the hunt. And you can kind of get this feeling like he's trying to gift himself into a position of power, because at this moment there isn't the actually I'm relatively sure at this moment are the Lannisters even the Wardens of the West?
Oh God, yeah, they've been they're
have they?
Their power cemented as long as the Starks have.
Okay.
It's the Tyrells who should be there, like, trying to kiss ass as much as
That's
possible.
right. Yeah.
And the Tullys too were raised up by the Targaryens. They were not. Riverrun was not the seat of the Riverlands for a long time. The Riverlands has historically been at war for a long time against the Ironborn. It was the Ironborn who controlled Harrenhal. It was not a River Lord. It was the king of the Ironborn.
I did not know that. Thank you very much.
True fact. Harren the Black and his 5 sons. They conquered all the way through from the Iron Islands all the way down to Harrenhal and built that thing. They were mighty, powerful conquerors.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, go to that.
You learn something new every day.
Yeah. Let me see. Hold on, I'll find
okay, so while we're sitting here looking at this hunt and these conversations going on, there's 2 things that you see that become very important. You meet Clubfoot, who is one of the strong boys. And he ingratiates himself with the women of the court because he's got obviously a messed up foot. He can't partake in the hunt. So he sits with the women and talks. And then you see Viserys become drunk. And you see this love of wine that he has. And it brings up the idea of Robert Baratheon and his love for wine. And you kind of get this comparison between the 2 of them. And I think that's a very sneaky and very good comparison to make, because Robert is really the only good person to sit in the throne that we have in our mind. Because you could sit there and argue, okay, he blasted the realm into debt. He hoarded around. He didn't actually care about his kids and anything like that. But there's other things to negate that. You know, he wanted Joffrey, who he believed to be his son, to become a good king. That's why he wanted Ned to finish raising him and teach him how to be a good king. That's also why he wanted Ned down there to help fix the problems that he had created, because he recognized he had created problems. So I think that's one of the great things that we see between the 2 kings. We see this great comparison. Yeah. And then you see the kind of backstabbing going on. Now it's been 3 years and 6 months since every single major lord of the land, and probably most of the minor ones, came to. In fact, I'll show you.
Go to that thing in the chat real quick. It's it's what the Riverlands used to look like before Aegon's conquest.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
You're not even going to recognize it.
Yeah. So this is
See if you can zoom in with
let me see. There we go. Yeah. Let me scroll down. Yeah, so you've got the Kingdom of the Iron Islands right here. Yeah, no, that's very interesting. So what's this right here? Is this
that's the Targaryen? Like they control that.
Oh,
land.
that's right. Okay, yeah. Because you got Stormlands, the Dorne, the Reach, and then of course the Great North.
Yeah. This is before King's Landing was even founded.
So right here, we'll put on the
world.
nobilities and constituencies. Actually, we'll take the nobilities off.
Actually, no, I think this does the year. So you can do like the year.
No, it doesn't. So it does the books.
It does the book.
So all you need to know is, as far as I know, there's a couple of changes, but the main difference is down here where the Crown lands are. This would be a dragon.
Yeah.
And then there's a couple of other houses that would be a little different, but for the most part, you've got the leader of every single one of these shields has come to King's Landing and sworn an oath and their fealty to Rhaenyra as the heir apparent. So
put the whole realm on notice.
Yeah. So here we are, 3 episodes and 3 years later, and you've got Jason Lannister of House Lannister. You've got probably a bunch of the lords of the Crown lands, probably some of the lords of Storm's End.
Definitely the Lord of Storm's End. They come.
Yeah, you've got some of these houses from the Reach. I'm guessing probably some Riverlands, but I base that solely on the King's Woods right here. That's where the hunt is. So I doubt there's a bunch of Starks that show up to, or Northmen that show up to this. It's just because it's a long way to go for a hunt. So you've got a bunch of these people, a bunch of these lords that show up, and they're all bickering, and they're all saying, okay, he's got a son now, so he's the heir, right? Because he's a man. So you've got all
that's what they're there for, right? They're there to celebrate the son.
Yeah, that's why they're there. And so you've got all this bickering that kind of happens in the background. And there's a huge blow up that happens between Rhaenyra and Viserys during this. And Rhaenyra leaves. And she runs into the woods. Sir Criston Cole follows her, and they survive a boar attack. And while this is happening, you hear that the great elk of the woods has been sighted. This great white beast. And it's used by Otto to show it even another sign that Aegon is the one. We should make Aegon the heir. Well, we finally get to the hunt. We finally get to see the beast, and it's just a normal elk. It's just a normal brown elk that there's nothing really special about. He's a big beast, but there's nothing really special about him. Contrast that with another scene we see of Rhaenyra and Chris. Actually, I think this is just Rhaenyra, where she's kind of looking over the camp, deciding, okay, time to go back and apologize. And this great big white elk, clearly the beast of the forest that they were talking about being the one that claimed it. This is
legitimacy.
Claiming the legitimacy of Aegon, presents himself and bows to Rhaenyra, showing the viewer Rhaenyra is the one.
Yeah. Which couldn't be more like, you've taken all like the drama out of this in terms of like she is the correct one.
I still liked it. I still liked the whole, because there's still magic in Westeros. This idea that the gods have determined she's the one to do it. I think it was pretty cool. I liked the imagery of it all.
Well, okay. So do you think then that was Bran?
Oh, I'm not going to get into that part.
Oh, on.
Gosh!
You can't not get into that because that's
no.
In the book.
No, I get. There are a lot of scenes in
all the gods
in a God's Wood, but I'm not. That's its own video, bro. Oh my gosh.
I know
It's a very it's a very
mind,
interesting idea, but no, I don't think Bran is
or
sitting
maybe
there
it was
watching
the
all
old
this.
gods. Yeah, no, he is. It's the old gods. They are trying to start a war to get rid of the dragons, so they can let the White Walkers through. There you go, bro. Because Bloodraven is trying to get the White Walkers through. He's trying to figure out how to bring down the wall.
What?
Oh yeah, dude. I don't know. Maybe
Is that legitimate?
Yeah, some people think Bloodraven's a bad guy for sure.
Oh, jeez.
The Three-Eyed Crow. People think he's a bad guy, and that
okay.
is. Oh God, dude, yeah, this goes way. Dude, it's been.
It's been
4,000
So
days.
fast forwarding just a bit. Bro,
there's evidence Mance. Not that I subscribe to this theory, but I'm not a person who shuns theories either. There's a theory that Mance Raider is Rhaegar.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and say no to that.
And that Corran Halfhand from the first book in the first season, the one that Jon has to kill in the duel,
right?
He is Arthur Dayne. And then there's another Night's Watchman that was always described as a bull, who would be the white bull that was at the Tower of Joy. I can't remember his name right now, but dude, you got to look this up, dude. It's not my theory, I promise.
I've already written this down. Yeah, I've already written this down. I will look this up, and we will discuss this at another time.
Let me look. I'll just give you the name of the white bull. I'll be like,
okay. So and Dan, remind me if I'm incorrect about this.
Gerald Hightower.
Oh, okay.
Is the white
but
bull.
at the end of this episode, there's another fight between. I say fight. I think it's more of a scuffle between Rhaenyra and what's his name? Rhaenyra and Viserys. And Viserys mentions that he might have wavered once, but he is now fully on her side. And it's one of those reminders that at the beginning of the first episode, we hear about this dream that he had, and that he dreamed of a son, and that this son would, I think it's supposed to be like become the next great king or something like that, and unite the realm. And so he's got this kind of thought in the back of his head throughout these 2 years that he's had this son that, okay, look, I named Rhaenyra my heir, but
now I've got
my dream has been accomplished now. Do I change?
Let us not forget why he named Rhaenyra heir in the first place.
To avoid Daemon.
To avoid Daemon. Not because Rhaenyra was owed it or because she was going to make the best queen or she did something that he was like, oh, you're going to make the best queen. Like, you just gave away your entire yearly allowance to the poor. You know what I mean? Like, so you understand the need of the people. You know, anything. But it was just like, I'm doing it out of spite.
So, so she's got this idea for, the last 3.5 years that she's only the heir because he's angry at Daemon. At any moment, he's going to take it back. And so the end of this episode, and we'll get into the fight in just a second, but the end of this episode, she gets confirmation that she's not just heir out of spite, that she is the heir and he will back her.
But I think it would have been nice for him to see the Buck moment.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe that would have been a little bit more significant for the viewer to be like, oh, it's not just crazy.
So, like, if he went out to find her and saw the Buck bowing at her, and then they went to kill the other one or something like that.
Yeah, or you could even go a little further. Like, maybe there was different groups of lords looking, and like a certain group, like the ones that eventually do back her, that like the ones that eventually are on her side, they're the ones that all come across her first, whereas the rest of them don't believe it. They're like, okay, like the Lannister could be like, a white Buck, are you joke? Bow to this girl, you know what I mean?
I
But then
like
like a
that.
Tully
Yeah.
can be like, I saw it, like, and throw his sword
Mm-hmm.
down. You know what I mean? And be
Mm-hmm.
like, you can see how the Civil War is about to start because nobody trusts anybody.
Yeah. No, I like that.
That would have been even cooler. That would have been like, whoa. Then all these guys would have had this reason to go home and be like, you're fighting for this girl.
Yeah.
Whereas everybody else, like the Stormlanders and the Westerners, would be like, I didn't see anything. You're not bound by my oaths.
So so on to the battle and the stepstones is going on, and it's not going well at all. You see, during the very opening scene, we should have said this, but the opening scene, Strong goes up to Viserys and says, "It's not going well. We need to send some aid." And he says, "This is my brother. This is the war. This war is of my brother's making. The crown has no need to aid or anything like that." And it's not till the end when he reaffirms his belief in Rhaenyra that he decides, okay, it's time to aid them. And because and this is one of the moments where you kind of see growth in Rhaenyra. You see this moment where she finally learns that she is the heir to be the heir, and has no other reason than because he believes that she's the best. And she tells him that he needs to aid his brother. He needs to be king and aid his brother in this fight. And that's when we get over the stepstones. We see Daemon fly in after listening to Vaemon Valerian, who is Corlys's brother, just spout straight up what's the word? Mutiny. Is just sitting there saying, Daemon doesn't know anything. He's getting us all killed. It's time to change leadership. And Daemon comes in this beautiful moment where he's flying his dragon and he lands. You get to see all the beautiful armor and everything. And he's standing there and he gets this note from the king. And this is probably the best memed moment of the entire show, where he comes in, he reads the note, and the note basically says, I'm sending an army, I'm sending money, don't worry, the crown will aid. And he realizes he's about to lose his victory. So he beats the absolute crap out of the messenger, which is why they now use ravens. I love that. I pray to God that we get that in just a throwaway line in Winds of Winter. Sam goes, "Hey, why do we use ravens?" Well, Prince Daemon, the dragon, not dragon knight, but Prince Daemon once tried to kill a messenger. I hope we get that because that's beautiful. But we go through this fight scene, which is a little it's a bit of a strange fight scene. We're no experts on medieval fighting.
Go watch Shad.
To shout out another channel. Shad at Night's Watch does he might do it on Shadversity. Does a very good expose on this fight. It's a little unrealistic.
It's hard to hit a moving target, but would it be wise to do such this is where it kind of gets into the mechanics of the whole battle's a little silly, right? I mean, why can't dragons beat these guys? How can they resupply if they control the seas? It's just kind of we get it.
But it ends with a very powerful image of Daemon walking out of the cave, holding a third of the crab lord, a crab king, where he's basically cut through this guy with Dark Sister. So and so that's how that episode ends. Overall, I think I would definitely give this one I think I give it a 7.5 maybe. There's some Yeah, there's some points in
I
it
really
that's
like
kind
this
of like,
episode.
yeah, there's some points in
I
it
didn't
where
like
it's
the
kind of
boar
like,
action,
yeah.
but
Um,
I did like the action set pieces in this one. I did like
mhm. And
I
there's
liked a
something to
lot.
be
I like
said
the
for
hunting scene.
using
I like the hunting
sets.
scene. I like the
Yeah,
political. Yeah, I like the political intrigue and the
there's
hunting
something to be
stuff.
said for using sets and not relying on a green screen to build your entire world.
Yeah, it introduces the Strongs really
Mm-hmm.
well. Like,
Yes, it does a very good job of introducing the Strongs. I think we've got time to do one more episode.
I think that's fine. I think we can do. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think we can knock another one
Um,
out here. And
so
so
the
let's
ne-
see. We have now done second of his name.
yeah,
And cool. We can get to King of the Narrow Sea. This will be a good stopping point.
So this episode is called King of the Narrow Sea, and is genuinely one of my favorite episodes for a bunch of reasons. And there are a bunch of different scenes in this episode, all involving Damon, who in this is his episode. This is Damon's episode. And so the episode begins with Rhaenyra at, where is she? Is she at Storm's End?
I think she's at Storm's End. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so she's at Storm's End, basically greeting a bunch of eligible men to be her husband, to be king consort. I guess technically prince consort at the moment. And so she meets all these men. She doesn't like any of them. The first one's very old. The next one's like 14. At this moment,
is that the Blackwood?
Yeah. At this moment, I think she's 16.
That's the part he kills the Bracken. I guess it would be doing a disservice if I didn't speak a little bit about the Brackens and the Blackwood.
Yeah. So
rivalry.
I'll be there in just a second. So she's disgusted. The old man saying, "Hey, be my wife." Then she kind of laughs at the young boy saying, "I'll be your husband. I'll defend you." All that. Obviously, because he's young and hasn't seen anything. And that's when he starts getting heckled. Now, the young boy is a Bracken.
He's a Blackwood.
The
heckler is the Bracken.
Yes. So, Dan, tell us about the Blackwoods and the Brackens.
Oh, goodness.
While I find them on the map.
It is very funny you mentioned that. I was just looking up, I was just doing some research yesterday about the phrase and stuff yesterday, just because I don't know why anymore. But I was looking up the different marriages between the different things, and there's a Blackwood Frey grouping. And the Blackwoods are actually first men. They're some of the few river lords that swear allegiance to the old gods. They swear fealty to the old gods. And it's actually really interesting, their dynamic, because they kind of find themselves in a weird pickle. They're like a semi-honorable house that's on the side of the Freys and the Lannisters after the end of the Civil War. So there's a really great scene between a Blackwood and Jaime when Jaime's outside the Siege of River Run. But that could be for a different Jaime podcast or something. But anyway, so the Brackens and the Blackwoods have a centuries-long rivalry in the Riverlands. I mean, it's like a famous rivalry in the world of Ice and Fire.
I'm not even sure centuries is nice enough. This thing has been going on
thousands of years. Yeah. I think as long as the Andals have been involved against the First Men, I think that's as long as this rivalry has been going on, because the Blackwoods, who also get credit for being the house that Bloodraven is from.
Okay, here we are. So over here at Raventree Hall is House Blackwood. And then over here at Stonehenge is House Bracken.
So yeah, so not very far at all.
Yeah, so they're neighbors. And
maybe go full screen right now, Caleb.
Let's see.
There we go. I got it.
Okay. So these are the two right here. And in A Song of Ice and Fire books, one of the arguments is that the Brackens keep moving a boundary line and trying to take land from the Blackwoods. So, and that's something that King Rob deals with. But just to give some context to what Dan is telling us.
Yeah, absolutely. So good job on the map there. I don't know if anybody could see it there. We could maybe pull it up in a separate tab, but the sigil for the Blackwoods is a conspiracy of crows around a weirwood tree. That was cool. Yeah, that's what thing is supposed to look like. It's a shame they don't put their sigil like right up.
It used to put it
Did
like
it really.
Oh, it's because I clicked Raventree Hall and not.
Oh, and not the Blackwoods.
There we go. There's House
yeah.
Blackwood's sigil. And here is House Bracken's sigil. A red stallion upon a gold shield on a brown field.
Yeah, so the writers really did some. This was a very cool nod, not even an Easter egg. Like this is like a thing that has no bearing on the plot. Like it's not just it does have bearing. Like this is a cool thing that happened, and I don't know. I just really enjoyed this part. It was like, oh, cool. Like I get that. And they didn't have to spell it out. Be like whispers like 5 times before the episode starts. Like, oh, by the way, the Blackwoods are this kid. Like this kid's a Blackwood. Yeah. And the other kid's a Bracken. Like it's like, okay, we get it.
Like other shows we see today.
Yes. Precisely. That map always blows my mind because it even has some Westerland stuff.
Yeah, it's a beautiful map.
Okay, yeah. So then that kid is killed, and then we kind of move on from there. She's disappointed, and she goes back to King's Landing.
She leaves.
Right?
Yeah, she leaves King's Landing, and we get this conversation between Kristen Cole and him and her, where Kristen Cole says, "Your father's not going to be happy. He spent months lining all this up." So we find out that she's left this grand tour where she's supposed to be going to all the houses. I assume all the major houses, the warden's houses.
I assume she probably would, if she kept going, she probably would have had some fun. Like she would have eventually met somebody she would have liked who would have been you know what I mean? Like even in the Reach or over in the West would have been cool, or you know what I mean, going through the story.
She would have met Lannisters. She probably would have met a Tarly.
A Lannister, some Florence, Tyrells. What am I talking about? They definitely would have tried to get some Tyrells in there.
So as they're sailing back to King's Landing, we see a dragon, and this dragon flies so close that the ship actually moves and hurts Rhaenyra. She falls and hits her head. Little surprised we didn't get that. That was just that. That was just nothing came of that.
Well, it was just showing.
And the next scene is in the throne room of King's Landing at the Red Keep, and all the lords and ladies of the realm, that are in King's Landing, are gathered there. And Daemon walks in. And if you remember, Daemon's been banished, but he walks in and wearing a crown.
As a conqueror.
A really bad looking crown too, by the way.
Yeah, it was it looked like somebody found it at a gift shop.
Yeah. Walks up to the throne, and a member of the King's Guard puts his blade at chest level with Daemon and kind of sticks him for a second.
Yeah,
it probably was. The Lord Commander is usually in the middle. And he grabs Daemon lifts the hammer, drops it, and says, "Add it to the others." A nice little reference to I doubt it was a reference, but kind of reminiscent of when the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard in season 1, Barristan the Bold, throws his sword at Joffrey and says, "Add it to the rest." Great
That's
scene, love
2,
it.
Right?
No, it's the 10th episode of season 1.
10th episode, okay,
yeah. So that happens, and there's this conversation between Viserys and Daemon, and Viserys says, says something, and then says, "Do you also call yourself king?" And Daemon says, "After we smashed the Triarchy, they named me King of the Narrow Sea." And you see, there's tension. There's what's going to happen?
Yeah, what is he going to do?
And he goes, "But I know there's only one king." He bends the knee and says, "My crown and the stepstones are yours. And he asks, who now guards the stepstones? And I forget the first thing he says, but he says, and 2,000 dead corsairs to warn against anyone else willing to threaten us or something like that. And it's such a beautiful scene. And we see Damon with his haircut, R.I.P. those beautiful long locks.
Yeah.
But we see this great scene between brothers. And it's very reminiscent of that thing of that scene at the end of the second episode I was talking about, where he recognizes that Viserys is king and he is his brother and he will defend him with everything he has. And he will do nothing to usurp Viserys' authority in front of other people. He may, and we see it a couple times, but he may curse Viserys to his face and say what he wants and treat him like a brother, but he will not allow other people to do that.
No, that's not a thing.
It's one of those things that Matt Smith kills this role.
Yeah.
Anytime you put Matt Smith and Patty Constantine on the camera, the audience is glued. It's an amazing episode.
Gives it his all.
Yeah. So we go from there to this kind of courtyard scene where they're eating, they're being married.
Oh, maybe Caleb cut out there.
Yeah.
There's a courtyard scene. Oh, you good there?
I think so. There's something just popped up on my. I think I'm good.
Scene. Yeah, cool. Yeah.
Okay, there it goes. Yeah. So we're in the courtyard scene, and you've got, what is it? You got Viserys and Daemon talking to each other, and Alicent's listening. And Viserys is telling Alicent all about growing up with Daemon. And it's just this really beautiful scene. And you can see Daemon and Viserys are just happy to be back to being brothers. And then it cuts to Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra. And you can just tell Rhaenyra's a little nervous. She's kind of like, Daemon's back. Am I going to lose my place again? Yeah. Which for me is kind of annoying because it's like we just listened to y'all patch everything up. And I can't remember so there's been a couple of months between 3 and 4. It's not a big time jump, but Rhaenyra has been on this tour for, I think it's supposed to be about 3 months now. And I think she has another couple months to go. So it hasn't been long enough for her, in my opinion, at least, for her to be worried about this. But she is. And we see Alicent really try to patch things up with Rhaenyra, and it does appear to work. It does kind of seem like they're going to be friends again, and everything in the world is going to be nice and rainbow and butterflies.
Really didn't do anything wrong. She couldn't say no. Like she's just not in that position to do that.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And then we get, and that, so that's this is a great example of a scene that feels a little woke, followed up by a scene that feels like the writers attempting to balance that wokeness. So the next scene is still in the courtyard, and Rhaenyra is talking to Daemon, and they start talking in High Valyrian. And one thing that I want to say about this show so far is the High Valyrian used in this show is miles better than the High Valyrian used in Game of Thrones. It feels much more royal.
Well-spoken.
It feels very proud. And I love that about this. So you've got this scene where same thing that Rhaenys had done to her early in the second episode, where she's just like, I'm just expected to push out children and do whatever men say. And then Damon, who is staying there with her, or is sitting down or drinking or something like that, goes, you're sitting there complaining an awful lot for someone that gets to be a queen and who everyone else, except maybe 11 people in this continent, would love to be. The small folk of this city would so much rather be in your position than the position they're in. Think about that. And I love this check to reality that Rhaenyra gets. Because there isn't really anyone else checking her.
Yeah, this is your biggest problem, you little brat.
Yeah, exactly. Your biggest problem is that your father's going to pick your... Well, not even that. Your biggest problem is that your father set up a tour for you to meet every eligible bachelor in the entire land. That's your problem.
Pick your own husband, yeah.
Yeah. Your problem is that your father gave you a choice. I got ordered to marry my wife.
Yeah.
Your father was ordered to marry his wife.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love that check that she receives in this. And then what happens after that?
Oh, that's when they start their little adventure.
Oh, right. Yeah. No, it's very, very weird. So we'll
spend as much time as we need, but they go and he kind of shows her. So she's landing like, hey, the world exists outside of what you think it is, like, and you need to be mindful of that. Like, these people are either make you or break you, kind of thing. Which
and he makes a point that what the small folk believe is actually important. Unlike what some other people will tell her that the small folk don't matter. It's very clear that he believes what the small folk think is important.
Yeah,
and
you get little sneaky
which is one of the issues with something happens later. But we'll discuss that thing in our second video.
And it would have been nice for him to like react to that later, and we'll get to that again. We'll get to that. But if he had been like, "You did what?" You know what I mean? Like, do you have any idea how they're going to look now? You came straight here from that. It's going to look like Rhaenyra told you to kill everybody. But anyway.
All right, so you got this thing that happens. Basically, Daemon and Rhaenyra become intimate, and it's in some form. And then Rhaenyra, then Daemon says, "No, I'm not going to do this." Leaves and goes and gets very drunk. And Rhaenyra runs back to the castle, and she actually, before they go to the brothel, she actually runs into who is it again, Dan? Sir.
At the brothel?
No, who's the strong knight she runs into? What's his name?
Oh, Kristen Cole.
No. She runs into Sir Strong, but what's his first name?
Harwin,
that's right. Yeah, so she runs into Sir Harwin Strong, and then they leave. They go away from that. That's just a little note for later in the show. So she runs into they go to the brothel, stuff happens. Daemon refuses to take anything further, and she leaves. And she goes back to the castle, and instead of returning the secret way that she left, she just goes straight through the front doors. And Kristen Cole is like, What? Wait, where'd you come from? And walks into her room, and they become intimate. And there's discussion here about whether or not he wanted it, or if she theoretically raped him. I don't think that discussion is very necessary. I think it's very clear that they wanted each other, and the psychology of all that can be left up for a later date.
Yeah, we'll leave that to the scientists at the liberal arts universities.
Exactly.
The fine men and women and other at the liberal arts universities.
Yeah. And so all this happens that night, and the next morning is where this episode ends. And so you've got someone sees Damon and Rhaenyra leave the brothel and goes and tells Mysaria, who I think that's Mysaria,
yeah, whatever.
Who is the whore that Damon was sleeping with. And she in turn brings Damon back to her house to sleep it off and sends a little whisperer to Otto Hightower to tell him what happened. And he then has to tell the king. Well, that's the question, Dan. Does he have to tell her? Does he have to tell the king?
I think that maybe he should have been a little bit more savvy. It would have been a little bit more savvy if he had just maybe had the news come from somebody else, like a Kingsguard, like somebody maybe he could maybe this would have been a good chance to try to get Kristen on his side.
Yeah.
Like just something like, because he would have known how it would have looked if he's as malicious as the show is trying to make it out to be,
It definitely feels like I'll tell you what it feels like, and you're gonna hate this, but it's a better version of what Varys does at the end of season 8.
What gets killed?
So if you remember, now I won't spend a lot of time talking about 8 because it's terrible, but if you remember, Varys seems to just run out of smarts, which doesn't work very well story-wise because he's never run out of smarts. So this feels kind of like something that Otto has no experience with. He doesn't know how to broach this kind of a topic because and it's not really anything you think he should know how to do because she's never had an impropriety before. His daughter, he's never had to police his daughter, at least on screen, or anything we're told about. He's never had to tell the king Damon is fooling around with someone. So, or at least we never see anything like that. So this feels like uncharted territory for him. So I think it does a very good job of making him scared in a sense about having to do something he's never had to do before. And I liked it. I thought it was a very interesting way of doing it. There is some stuff that I kind of wish he was a little more tactful with. I'm not sure I would have had 9 different ways of saying they fooled around with each other. But it definitely led to some fun jokes. They were coupling. Well, what does that mean?
What does that mean?
I don't know.
It's like it's just like he should have been. If they wanted it to be more dramatic, if they wanted it to be sneaky, he should have been more sneaky. Like he should have been more like, I'm going to have it go through somebody else for sure. Because if I bring him this news, it's going to look stupid. And if he gets mad at me for not knowing first, it's like, well, the news should have gone straight to you, my lord.
Yeah.
Your Grace.
But
I think that was the only mistake. I was like, well, that's really smart.
So the next thing has Damon is dragged into Damon stumbles into King's Landing after or into the Red Keep at least after finding out that Mysaria is no longer just a whore, and the King's Guard grab him, drag him into the throne room, and Viserys and him yell at each other. And it's a very good moment. It's because you start this episode on edge and you end on edge. And I think it does a very good job of mirroring how it starts.
Yeah.
And, he says, give her to me, even though she's tainted. I'll take her as she is. I'll wed her in the style of our house. You get to see even more how the Targaryens are not the same as the other houses. And, not everyone is Jaime and Cersei. And see, there's just more strain on that relationship there, and more information given to us about the differences between the Targaryens and the rest of the Seven Kingdoms, Westeros. And then he says, "No, how dare you? I banish you. Go back to the Eyrie and your wife." And then there's this scene between Alicent and Rhaenyra. And I think this is really the breaking point of their relationship. So if you remember at the beginning of this episode, it kind of feels like their relationship gets healed. They have that schism after Rhaenyra finds out that her father is going to marry Alicent. And hang on. Sorry, throat hurt. And then you get this scene where at the beginning of this episode where it feels like they've kind of come to terms with everything, and their relationship is healed and they want to be friends again. And so the scene in the Godswood where Alicent and Rhaenyra are talking to each other, and Alicent basically says, "Swear to me that you never that you're still virtuous," or something like that. And Rhaenyra knows what Alicent wants. She wants to hear, "I did not lay with anyone." But what she says is, "I did not lay with Daemon."
Mm-hmm.
So she lies. She knows what question she's asking, but refuses to answer that actual question and answers the one that keeps her honest. And you can tell no one actually believes her, because the last scene, the king gives her moon tea.
Yeah,
which is their plan B.
Matter what she said. It's like, hey, well, no matter what,
Westeros plan B.
Then you have nothing to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
And
which is interesting because we've got not necessarily information, but some belief that moon tea can actually make you a little crazy. From what's her name? John Aaron's wife.
Oh, Lysa? You think so? You think that's what did it?
I think the forced abortion and the moon tea made her a little crazy. Because as far as I can tell in the book, she basically immediately becomes crazy.
Well, people sometimes explain that away. I don't think that this is the answer. But
it also could be just the whole fact that she loses the baby and then immediately.
Well, some people think she was molested by her father too.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, that's why she's so messed up.
Well,
it's like a secret the cat refuses to acknowledge. That's why her.
You think there would be more stuff said than just "I'm sorry about the tea" on his deathbed?
True, maybe, yeah. Or maybe who knows, man? Who knows? Maybe it was his kid. And he made her drink it. Anyway, that's why this is it's as vile as it could be. These are just theories because the fandom needs the next book. Release the book, George. Look what you're doing.
So
no, seriously, thanks for the book if you ever listen to this.
Yeah. So that's it with episode 4. This one, I really like this one. It's got that little negative aspect of the whole incest in it. But it's a very intriguing episode. This is also like a 7.5, maybe even an 8 for me, because I love how this episode begins. It's such a beautiful moment between Damon and Viserys. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, it's just it's a good episode. I really like this episode. It was kept in the pace well. Just the dialogue matters. Like, you know, this maybe, if I could speak to one thing I would have liked to see more in this episode, is her like learning how to rule. You know, like trying to actually like take an active role in like going to the small meetings or going to see different parts of, like, you know, it would have been cool to have a port scene to be like, so how does it get taxed? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, like how do we control what comes in and out of the city? You know, and it's like, well, this is how we do it. Like, you know, like, sure, they can get it off the ports, but they can't get it in the city without a pass or a tax. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So,
right, because there's that scene. It's a small council scene in. Oh, I don't remember where it is. I think we've covered it, but as someone's walking out of the room, they say something about wool.
Oh yeah, I
like
think that's
taxes on wool. Is that later? Okay,
later,
I can't remember. But yeah, so a little more political intrigue, I think, might have been nice. But no,
I hate to say it, like, it's because it comes up later that it's like it's a critique of her that she's not as savvy as she should be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's valid because they should have done more or explained. I don't know. They should have. I would have loved a couple of more of like young Melissa. What is her name? Millie Alcock.
Yeah, I thought it was
Emily or Millie or something. I don't know. I'm not sure. Or it's Millie Bobby Brown. I think I'm getting her confused with the Stranger Things girl.
Millie.
But
yeah, it is Millie. Millie Alcock.
It is Millie. Okay, I thought it was the same. Yeah. I just think it was just a couple of scenes because she was so good on screen. Everyone would have loved to see her, like, you know, I think it would have been great to see her, like, you know, just a couple of questions here and there, maybe tagging after her dad a little bit, you know, anything. Yeah. Be like, I don't want to pick a consort. I want to figure out, you know, how we're going to get Old Town to pay this fee, or, you know what I mean? Like, some more like powerness about it. You'd be like, well, I don't understand how we're going to pay these iron loan banks, Dad.
More
growth. I mean?
He's
like, no. Like, this is what matters. Like, the politics matter.
Yeah. So, yeah, we see a lot of growth from her in most aspects of her life, with the exception of what the show's about. So, yeah, you know, there's some stuff to be said there. But overall, so that's through 4 episodes so far, Dan. Where would you rate this show?
Oh, I think they're sitting at a solid 8.4 for me. 8.3.
Oh, wow, we're being real specific.
Yeah, I'm getting up there in the decimals just because 8.33 repeating. Yeah, definitely.
All right, so we're at, okay. So in the same time, all right, I'm a terrible typer apparently. So in the same time period that we're through right now, in Game of Thrones, we would have been at through that tournament, and Eddard would officially be investigating Joffrey's death. Or not Joffrey, sorry. Jon Arryn's death.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I believe what's his name has been taken. Tyrion has been taken on the road. I believe that's how that episode ends.
That's such a good scene because she's like,
I love it. It's word for word with the exception of one house out of the book.
Yeah, it was very good. I really liked it. I was like, this is so cool.
Yeah.
You swore oaths to my father.
So
I was there.
On those first 4 episodes, what's better so far? The first season of Game of Thrones or the first season of House of the Dragon?
Well, it's so hard because Game of Thrones already sets up like the White Walkers and Jon Snow's headed up to the wall and Ned's heading south, and you kind of like just hanging around with Bran because he's just a kid, so it's not, you know, he's learning about the world as you learn.
Yeah,
so,
yeah,
you know,
which is a really cool thing.
Yeah, that's why I liked, because there's scenes in the first season where Bran is learning how to be a little lord.
Mhm.
And I really thought that would have been cool to get like some lessons for Rhaenyra. Like, she could have had a maester and be like, you need to learn the houses. It's time to stop running
Yeah.
around and riding your dragon so much. Why would I study a map when I can go see it, maester? And he's like, that's a good point.
Yeah, no, I like that. That would have been there's a lot of little things that would have been really nice to see in this show, and I think that's one of the issues with them just doing hour-long episodes. I think if they did feature lengths, which at $20 million an episode, you think they could do. But
Yeah,
yeah, I
that's getting into
just
realm I'm not really so sure about right now, just because I'm not.
because of how the
I
last
heard that
feature lengths ended.
they wanted it to be. Apparently, George wanted it to be 13
Yeah,
episodes, so that would have given a little bit more, like maybe 7 episodes, 7 and 6 between the decades. So there's probably stuff he wanted to do
so
in the first part.
I know you got to go in a second, but I was watching FNT last night. Actually, I watched some of it. I'm going to finish it today, but they were talking about how it might have been a good idea to break the show in half and have 6 or 7 episodes with Millie Alcock and the other girl as the actresses and getting a little more intrigue and all that, and then come back in a couple of months and do the next 7 or the next 6 or whatever you decide to do. And I actually get the feeling that might be what we get for season 2. I think they would be
Like 6 episodes and 6 episodes or something.
I think they would be I think what the shareholders should sue if we have to wait 2 years for the next season of this. Because
HBO has no money, dude.
I know.
Warner has no money.
But something should happen because they are at an all-time, well, I say all-time.
Dude, it all comes
of the
down
last
to
5 years, they are at an all-time high. They own the market right now. If they could release this show,
don't have any liquidity to actually do anything about it, because that's how bad their situation is. Now they're literally banking all the eggs on a big ass Superman movie, and I'll be honest, I'm going to go see it.
Oh, I am too, 100%. If anyone watching this doesn't think they want to go see it, because just listen to some of those reviews from Henry Cavill. He's excited for this. He wants this. He wants the optimism of Superman back, and so do we. So excited Henry Cavill is back.
I think it's time for Henry Cavill after Superman, because if it goes well with Warner and slip him into his own Game of Thrones show, I think he'd make a great young Robert Baratheon.
Oh yes, Henry. Look, here's the fact about it. Henry Cavill should be James Bond. He should be a lead of a Game of Thrones show. He should be. Though I will say, I still am Team Richard Madden. I think Richard Madden would be an amazing James Bond.
Oh, or he would make just a dastardly. I don't know if you could cast it, because he would be the most interesting character for that kind of show. If there was a Blackfire show and he was Blood Raven. He would be more Bittersteel, but I wouldn't want to see him die and lose, because I'd love to see Henry Cavill as the guy who was a battle man, and then he goes to be the Hand of the King. And
how tall is
Whispers? I don't know, but he's too thick, I think, to be a proper Blood Raven. Because then I do want to see him get banished to the wall, and then
who he could play.
And he's
6'1". So he's 6'1". If they filmed it correctly, he could be Dunk the Tall.
I was thinking that, but Dunk is too
tall.
He's not too. No, he's not. Well, he is supposed to be huge.
He also does not
speaking lines.
Yeah, Dunk is not a good thing to look at, if I recall correctly. Isn't he supposed to be a kind of a plain, poor looking guy?
Yeah, I mean he's not. He's from Flea Bottom, so
yeah. But I'm just so happy Cavill is back.
Oh yeah, me too. And I think it's just something that we can all take joy in, and maybe we end there on the same way that what Henry Cavill wants for the new Superman movies is hope, optimism, and joy. So
Yep.
with that, we thank you for joining us in this excursion into talking about House of the Dragon. Caleb, It's been fun. I'm glad.
4 episodes in.
Yep.
We'll try, we're not really sure when we'll be able to put out the next half of this.
But we're going to try.
Follow us on Twitter at KingsAdvisors_. I'll make sure everyone knows in advance when we're able to meet up again. And other than that,
the like button, check the links in the descriptions. Caleb, anything you want to plug?
No, I don't have anything to plug. What I will say is, keep in mind, I'll probably have some streaming up in the next couple of days for some other video games. Might have some Factorio up tomorrow afternoon. Not sure yet. But yeah, hope everyone enjoys this. I can't wait to get back with Dan. Hopefully next week.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Cool.
All right. Bye.
Thanks, guys.